July 22nd, 2012, as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be with the coming of the Son of Man. If you look at the title to this video, Ariel Sharon, as it was in the days of Noah. To understand what I'm talking about, and once you do understand, I think your eyes will be opened and you will start to really get excited about the rapture of the church. Here we are in 2012, but let me explain. Let me take you back 8 years before Ariel Sharon has his massive stroke, ends up in a coma, goes through his own 7-year tribulation. Here we are in 2012. Defies all medical expertise, medical reasoning, medical knowledge of how this man, being obese, with severe health problems to begin with, how he has survived his very own 7-year tribulation. Let me explain this, and I think you're going to get excited. But to do so, let's go back prior to his stroke, prior to the prediction by the 108-year-old Rabbi Yitzhak Kaduri, who had been visited by the Messiah, who the Messiah gave him his name. He wrote it down on a piece of paper. We know this, if you've been following very closely, to be opened 1 year after his death. And when he opened the note, the letter, it contained the name of the Messiah, Yeshua. More recent breaking news before I get into Ariel Sharon, and we know that the chief rabbi said that upon the death of Ariel Sharon, the Messiah would return. Now, for more updated news on Ariel Sharon and the chief rabbi, Yitzhak Kaduri, we find out now that a young student of his visited him in the hospital and kept pressing the issue of when will the Messiah come. And the rabbi would just kind of laugh. And finally, after consistent pressure put on the rabbi by the young student of his, the rabbi told him that the Messiah would return. Of 5772, and that would be from, I hope I have that right, 5772. That would be a time frame from July 19th up until August 18th, 2012. Not pinning it down to a single date, but now you have a window of when the rabbi says the Messiah will return. The rapture of the church will take place. And we are fast approaching the 9th of Av, which is July 27th, as you know. And what is coming up? The Olympics. A lot of things are tied in. I hope I have that date right, Av 5772. And I don't have it in front of me. If not, correct me. I don't like to keep notes, but I believe that is right, and I will double check. But what has this got to do with Ariel Sharon, who is still in a coma? Let's go back to the year 2005. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's going to make sense in a few moments, and we'll tie this in with as it was in the days of Noah. In August of the year 2005, against the emotionally charged protest of many Israelis, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon ordered the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, to forcefully evict Israelis from their homes in the Gaza Strip. The result was the armed forces of Israel physically removing their very own people from their homes in order to give their entire life's work and their very communities over to the Palestinians. Not only was this decision by Ariel Sharon against his own people, but it was also against the God of Israel. Ariel Sharon gave away God's covenant land, which was given only to the children of Israel. So before this happens, before he has a stroke, in 2005, he orders the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, to remove Israelis from their home. They have to leave their home, their livelihood, their property, and he gives the land to the Palestinians. Now we have the chief rabbi, Ishak Kaduri, that gives a prediction. And when he gave this prediction, Ariel Sharon was alive and well, that upon the death of Ariel Sharon, the Messiah would return. Shortly after, days after, this information came out a year after the rabbi's death. Ariel Sharon suffers a massive stroke. But it doesn't end there, because for 7 years he's remained alive. God has kept him alive, and I believe he's done so for a reason. 2012 will be 7 years that Ariel Sharon has been kept alive against all medical odds, all medical reasoning. Remarkable. Where a young man, maybe a college athlete or a professional football or sports figure in the prime condition and prime health of their life, that suffered this type of aneurysm stroke, would not barely make it to the emergency room, let alone survive 7 years. Let me bring you some more information that I don't think you are aware of. How severe this trauma was to Ariel Sharon. Ariel Sharon, at the time, had suffered a series of two debilitating strokes within a few months after he had ordered the forced removal of God's chosen people from their covenant land. In 2006, back then, the 77-year-old Ariel Sharon lay unresponsive in a coma and continues to be comatose to this date. 2012, there were a multitude of medical setbacks in the early stages of Ariel Sharon's 3 3/4 year illness that even a young man, a healthy man, would have succumbed to. It is indeed extraordinary that Ariel Sharon has survived for these past 7 years in a coma. From a medical standpoint, the fact that he even survived all the multiple, potentially fatal medical complications experienced early on is nothing short of miraculous. Following is a rundown. Now here's a rundown on the many medical complications that, from a medical perspective, would have, should, could have ordinarily been fatal and would have killed a healthy person. You got to remember, Ariel Sharon was up in years. He was obese. He was in very serious condition. And this news has come out that the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, apparently initially had what is known as a traveling clot, a stroke caused by an arterial septal defect, ASD, commonly known as a hole in his heart. Note that an ASD is usually a congenital, at birth, defect that is usually surgically repaired in early childhood. Here this man was, I believe, 77 years old when they discovered he's got a hole in his heart. And he's lived all this time with a hole in his heart. At that time, Ariel Sharon was preparing to have cardiac evaluation for the repair of the ASD. They were going to go in and fix the hole in his heart. Granted that the medical field was not as advanced in Ariel Sharon's youth, but one would think that the ASD would have been discovered and repaired prior to the age of 77. Ironically, Ariel Sharon had his first stroke the night before he was going to go under the knife. He was going to undergo a cardiac catheterization for the evaluation of the hole in his heart. The ASD was purported to be the cause of the first stroke, which caused, and there's some medical terms it's very hard for me to pronounce, that caused the clot that traveled to and obstructed his cerebral arteries in his brain. Apparently, the anticoagulant blood thinner that was used to treat this first stroke in December helped precipitate Ariel Sharon's second and more debilitating stroke that occurred in January of 2006. Sharon's second stroke resulted from a blood vessel rupturing and bleeding into the cranium, into the skull. Due to the increased pressure from the massive hemorrhaging, the bleeding, out of control bleeding into his skull from the second stroke, Ariel Sharon afterwards underwent 2 lengthy neurosurgeries to control the bleeding. The first neurosurgery, which is brain surgery, lasted 7 hours, and the second neurosurgery lasted 14 hours. After the second prolonged 14-hour surgery, Sharon was placed on a ventilator, and some reports suggested that he was suffering from paralysis in his lower body. So now he's completely paralyzed in his lower extremities from this 14-hour surgery, the stroke, this massive bleeding into the skull, into the cranium. Now take note that about 30% to 60% of people with this type of hemorrhage, where a brain bleed, die, as was Sharon's second stroke. They don't make it, let alone live 7 years. In those who survive long enough to reach an emergency room, bleeding usually has stopped by the time they are seen by a doctor. Many people with ruptured aneurysms or these types of hemorrhages of the brain usually do not even survive long enough to reach an emergency room. They don't make it in time to the hospital. Of those who do, about 50% plus die within the first month of treatment. Therefore, Sharon surviving the second stroke was against incredible medical odds to begin with. The complications following that he survived as well are beyond incredible from a medical standpoint. The month following the major stroke, February of 2006, Ariel Sharon had to undergo 2 more surgeries for bowel and stomach complications. So not only has he survived a 7-hour excuse me, and a 14-hour surgery, now he has to undergo 2 more surgeries for bowel and stomach complications. Ariel Sharon underwent subsequent surgeries the following month. In February of 2006, doctors performed emergency surgery to remove 50 centimeters of his large intestine that had become necrotic, probably because of a blood clot. On the 22nd of February, he underwent an additional procedure to drain excess fluid from his stomach, discovered during a CAT scan. In July of 2006, Ariel Sharon's condition worsened with his kidneys starting to fail. So he was put on hemodialysis, and he also was treated for a blood infection. By August of the same year, 2006, he was diagnosed with double pneumonia, which was treated and resolved. That following November, Ariel Sharon was back again, rushed in intensive care unit ICU, being treated for a cardiac heart infection, which too was successfully taken care of. To recap, Ariel Sharon, at the time, a 77-year-old obese, overweight man with a cardiac defect, experiencing both an embolic and hemorrhaging stroke, bleeding of the brain within a 3-week period. Due to the massive uncontrolled bleeding in his brain from the second stroke, he underwent a 7-hour surgery and then a 14-hour surgery that left him paralyzed. Within a month, he underwent yet another surgery, this time removing necrotic gut. Part of the large intestine had died from a blood clot. Shortly after that surgical intervention, there was another surgery required, this time on his stomach for fluid accumulation. Next medical setback, he started hemodialysis for kidney failure and also had a blood infection. He then had double pneumonia and later a cardiac heart infection, which were all resolved with IV antibiotics. Unbelievable. So within less than a year after his 2 strokes, Ariel Sharon had 4 surgeries, a bout of double pneumonia, a blood infection, a heart infection, and renal kidney failure requiring hemodialysis. Any redundancy of the facts is in order to firmly establish the case of the many serious complications suffered by Sharon. Each one of these serious medical problems should have been fatal in itself. As well known, the more ill and compromised a patient, the less reserves there are to fight off infections. In Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's weakened state of health, it's incredible that he was able to survive such serious infections and other complications. Since the last reported complications back in November of 2006, it appears as though Ariel Sharon has been status quo now for 7 years here in 2012, and still on life support and still in a coma. It's unclear if he is still paralyzed, but he is on a ventilator, life support, and a breathing machine. Bearing in mind that patients who are inactive due to being bedridden for 7 years are more at risk for pneumonia and bed sores, which themselves can lead to infection and blood clots. The fact that Ariel Sharon is already predisposed to clot formation with a history of the previous stroke and intestinal blood clot, it is surprising, though, with his inactivity, that there have been no further complications from clots. Note that one clot in the lungs or in the brain would be instantly fatal. It appears that it may be God's grace and divine planning that Ariel Sharon ever survived to begin with, as well as the fact that he has had no further serious complications since that time of November of 2006. According to Rabbi Kaduri, Ariel Sharon's demise will usher in the coming of Yeshua, the Messiah. From this perspective, it appears as if God may be allowing Ariel Sharon's remarkable survival to fulfill his purposes. Now, this is what you're going to find very interesting. Just as Methuselah, the oldest man to ever live, death was prophesied to usher in worldwide judgment with the flood of Noah, so may Ariel Sharon's death usher in the return of the Messiah and the coming judgment of the upcoming 7-year tribulation period. Methuselah was the grandfather of Noah, and together they attempted to persuade the wicked people of the earth to return to godliness. Methuselah was the last human being to have personally known Adam, who had personally known and walked with God. Methuselah and the others before him were taught and could know about God directly from Adam. Noah was the first one in Adam's lineage to not have known and been able to learn about the things of God directly from Adam. As such, Noah did not have the first-hand account by which to have been taught, so Noah was the first to believe solely by faith alone. God planned to bring the flood of Noah after all the men who walked in the ways of the Lord had been removed. Methuselah lived during the construction of Noah's ark, but died right before the flood, as God had promised him that he would not be killed with the unrighteous. The name Methuselah translates, when he is dead, it shall be sent. Again, the name Methuselah translates as, when he is dead, it shall be sent, meaning the deluge of judgment would come after his death. Therefore, Methuselah's death marked the end of mankind's grace period and the coming of the great flood, as in the days of Noah. Perhaps it will be that after the announcement of Ariel Sharon's death, those who are alive and living for the Lord will not die, but be raptured and be removed, just as Methuselah died before the flood, so that he would not be killed with the unrighteous in the coming flood of judgment. Just as Methuselah's death indicated the coming literal flood of judgment, so might Ariel Sharon's death signify the coming flood of judgment upon an unrepentant world. Rabbi Kaduri's prophecy of the coming of the Messiah after the death of Ariel Sharon may perhaps equate to the meeting of the ready bride with the Lord in the air. Conversely, the Jews, of whom many will accept the coming Antichrist, may think that Kaduri's prophecy referred to the coming Antichrist as being their Messiah. And Ariel Sharon, is Ariel Sharon, good question, is Ariel Sharon our modern day Methuselah? Only time will tell, but in the meantime, may we remember to pray for the salvation of Ariel Sharon and for the many not covered by the blood of the Lamb and for the peace of Jerusalem. I'll put the link to that article below, Rapture 2012. Are you rapture ready? I will put the link below to this amazing article in the Show More section. And once again, JumpOfTheGodMinistries.com. My videos have helped you in any way and you feel led to support our inner city outreach ministry and mission, helping the needy and the homeless. I'll put that link below as well. We really just appreciate your gift to the ministry. Leave me comments, everyone. God bless.